How's it going, everyone? Jiivita here with another update video, this time for testing 241.5. So this includes the beacon compactness, the reclaim system, and now it is being enhanced with glass signs and emojis. And a little side note, the emojis are part of Gleam Club, so if you're putting them on the signs, as you can see here, you need to be doing that on a beacon that essentially the mayor or the owner of that beacon has Gleam Club. So you don't necessarily have to have Gleam Club yourself to put them on signs, just the owner of the beacon has to have that. But anyway, it's kind of crazy because if we jump over here, there are 1,300 different emojis. Essentially, the entire set of emojis that are available on the Boundless forums are now available on signs and text, and basically just in Boundless in general. So that is a little bit crazy. So the forums do have a lot more emojis. It's something like 3,500, but they removed all of the flags because, well, that really has no business being in Boundless in the first place. And they also got rid of the gender specific emojis. So all the man this and woman that, they just went with the gender generic emojis. So that narrowed it down to 1,300, which I don't know, that's kind of crazy. But there's even like weird things like automobiles and things like that doesn't really make sense for it to be in Boundless. So more Boundless-centric emojis would have been awesome, but there has been a little bit of fallout since recording most of this video. A lot of people are kind of unhappy that the emojis aren't fitting with the current art style of the game, and I have to tend to somewhat agree with that, but it all depends on how it's used. But James has already mentioned that 3x3 and 2x2 Ocean glyphs, as well as GUI icons, Boundless items, creatures, tools, items, foods, etc. will also be added to this emoji system at some point. They did the current set of emojis because they were low-hanging fruit, to quote his words. So they're relatively easy to implement, and they've also been a long requested feature. So this is literally the first pass on the emojis, and then later on we'll have much more Boundless-centric emojis at some point. But as far as the new signs, there are essentially two types that each have, of course, the two subtypes. So we have regular glass signs that do not have emissive text, or rather the text doesn't glow, and then we do have glowing versions of each. So in all, that's 4 new types of signs. So we have the little ones plus the modules that you can stick together to make much bigger signs. So pretty darn cool. So over here we have some examples of the not glowing signs versus the glowing signs. And I use the white ones here just to kind of illustrate that this is a glowing sign, so it's really kind of hard to read because it tries to make that black text glowing, and if you don't have Gleam Club and can manually change the color to, say, white or something to make it more visible, the color of sign that you make does make a pretty important difference when it comes to readability, because if you use a light color, it's going to default to black text. If you use a dark color, it'll default to a white text. For readability purposes. However, glowing and black doesn't get along that great. Taking a closer look at the glass signs, or rather their recipes, there's no word on whether or not these are finalized. However, all of the glass signs have the same recipe that more or less follows in line with all of the other sign recipes. So there's the main material that it's made out of, plain glass, along with glue and ink. So makes sense and really isn't that bad. I was kind of assuming that the glass signs that don't glow would have a different recipe from the glowing glass signs, but I'm kind of happy to see that the glowing glass signs don't have something crazy like glowing lamella or some extra piece of gleam or something stuck in there. And naturally the glass sign should take on the color of the glass used to craft it. So, but again, who knows if these are set in stone recipes, but they look pretty decent to me. So taking a closer look at how signs and glass panes kind of interact. So on either side of this sign right here are glass panes, and they're placed a little bit differently. The signs, even though they look like glass panes, are still placed as signs. So if you want them to say be on here, I would have to first place a block place the sign, and then I can remove the block on the back side. There's not a way to just go ahead and fill this window area without there being a block there first. Also, glass signs can't be placed on essentially the inside of a block, so like this glass pane is technically taking up this block space rather than being just proud of that block space like this sign is. So to kind of give a better illustration, because I know it's hard to see, so I'm standing on the glass pane, which is on the outside of this block area, just like this glass sign, but then this glass pane is setting inside of this block. So kind of interesting, something to keep in mind. And if you notice, put away all my stuff here, you can see that they don't blend together perfectly even when they are perfectly in line. So if you're going to do like a window and you want a sign on that window, you might just go ahead and make the entire window out of signs. The one reason why you might not want to do that is that these signs still do count as a mesh, even though the glass panes do not count as a mesh. And that's because, well, the signs, they have more visual things to represent and more information to be processed and transmitted over the network. And so, yeah, you don't want just a crazy number of signs. So that is kind of why it's still bound to the mesh limit, at least from my understanding. Of course, these glass signs still follow pretty much all the normal rules for signs. So if we come over here to the other side, you can't see the text from the inside. So you could even set up like some pretty opaque emojis to essentially make a one-way, not really mirror, but one-way windows, I suppose. So taking a closer look at glass placement versus sign placement. So we have a potential window right here, and yeah, if we want to place, say, a glass pane and we don't mind it being inside of this block space, we can place it right there and it's perfectly flush with the black marble. However, if we want to place a sign, if we try to do the same thing, even though they look like glass planes, they still follow the sign rules. So we try to add it to this glass pane right here, and well, that's how a sign would normally act. So come over here, kind of the same sort of deal. So if we want to make a window here, we're actually going to have to place signs essentially on this block right here or this block right there. So try to place a sign, it's either going to be there, or we can add some blocks here once we clean up these glass panes over here. Now we can go ahead and place our glass signs there, and if we want to have glass panes flush with that, we'll actually need to add a block right here. And now we can place a glass pane towards the inside of this block, or rather up against the building. So they'll be, sticking out slightly from the building, but then they'll be completely in line if you're trying to blend both signs and glass panes together. So now we can add our text. Very nice. And of course we could just make the whole thing out of glass signs, but we've already kind of covered why you might want to avoid that. Another little trick is if you don't want the text to be butted up right against the edges there, it almost looks like the E is being chopped off, but you still want it to be centered, you can just hit place a space on either side of your text, and it'll make it a little bit smaller and fit inside of the borders a little bit better. Just kind of personal taste. So moving on to the emojis are vector rendered, which is basically say they use fancy math to be able to scale infinitely without getting pixelated. So it doesn't matter if your emoji is 1 sign big or 100 signs big, or rather a 10 by 10 sign, they will still render nice and crispy. And as you can see here, the emojis even take on essentially the personality of the sign. So this stone sign, it gets kind of this texture that it literally looks like you maybe took a chisel and a hammer and chiseled out this bomb emoji. Moving on to the iron sign here, The metal signs are emissive on them on their own, and that seems to take away much of that personality. So we put this away. You can see that this bomb emoji on this sign looks pretty much identical to the one on the gleam side. So, but move on to this wood sign. You can see it has all of this kind of speckledy, like, you know, you kind of rolled a bunch of paint on there and the wood grain didn't quite take completely evenly. Coming over here to the non-glowing glass sign, you can see it has an interesting texture. I'm not really sure why it went with this texture. Maybe the paint didn't spread out evenly or something. There's kind of some, not as much speckling as the wood sign, but it does give it some nice personality. And then over here, the glowing version on the glass sign, you can see pretty much looks like all the other glowing versions. If you didn't already know, the maximum size for sign modules is 10 by 10, meaning you can have one massive cookie, which should make a certain cookie-crazed user quite happy. You can also take advantage of the lighting system, or rather how lighting is done in Boundless, to make some pretty interesting visual effects during certain times of the day. Essentially, if your walls are only 1 block wide, it kind of messes with the way Boundless does lighting and kind of causes these really interesting lighting effects, which actually looks pretty darn cool with some of the emojis. And sadly, while there is not a way to get Gleam Club on creative servers just yet, you can use the Lua scripting to generate signs that have the emojis on them. As you can see here, the devs even provided a script that makes a set of signs with every single emoji in the game currently. So pretty darn crazy, just all the different emojis that are available. So I mean, we even have shoes, a crown, looks like a target board, a game controller, bowling pins, mountains, pretty crazy. You can interact with any number of these, and the way they spawn these in are actually the hex codes, but oftentimes you can use the plain speech method, just like on the Boundless forums and, say, Discord. So. And as you can see here, we have the scream emoji in the display text, but right here it's just the plain English. There is a hex code for all of them, so if you know the hex code, you can use that directly. Could come in real handy if you're wanting to put a lot of text into a sign and you're running into that character remaining limit. So the hex code could potentially be less characters, but certainly a lot harder to figure out what the code actually is. And a good thing to notice that you don't even really have to put spaces in between the emojis, but just kind of habit, I suppose. So there we go. We have screen, car, and the number 1. We can go ahead and add maybe a grin in there. So pretty... Oh, look, forgot to put the R. Ha! There we go. So pretty relatively user-friendly. It would have been awesome if there was some kind of emoji helper, like either see a list of emojis or as you type them out, it starts giving you suggestions. But that would have literally required building that system from scratch to then add into the chat system and plus the signs, and yeah. Which would have naturally meant a lot more development time, and yeah, I would really just rather just have the patch now. It's also worth noting that you can have emojis in both the beacon name and settlement name. So if you saw my previous update video, you know that whenever you break or reclaim a spark generator, now there is a special spark item that is generated that you can then put into a new spark generator. So you can literally sell that to other players, or just move your spark generator to the other side of your base or another planet and not have to worry about losing all your spark. Previously, it only took like 1 second to convert, so they did up that to 8 seconds. Apparently, some users were concerned or thought it was just wrong to be able to say take all of your compacted peat, which goes in very slowly, and basically for free upgrade it to a very fast transfer of energy into a new spark generator, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because you've already turned it into spark, so why should it take longer to convert it into what it already is? But you know, to each their own, and it is still 2 times faster than the current fuel for generating sparks, so it is still faster. And some cool under the hood or engine modifications is that GUI assets are now offline processed, meaning faster startup times up to 20% faster for PS4. So I know a lot of PS4 users will be quite happy to hear that, and pretty cool change. So should make it faster for PC as well, just might not be as noticeable. But anyway, I think that wraps this video up quite nicely. I'm really excited to get a hold of this. This patch is getting a lot of really cool features in it. The reclaim system, the spark item, now new signs and emojis. Pretty exciting stuff. Love to get my hands on this. Anyway, this was Jiivita. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to see more like this. And if there's anything you didn't like, please let me know down below. Also, if you like my channel, want to get cool perks, check out my Patreon page. Until next time, peace.